Right, little bit of help that you might be able to use in the essay about the biggest influence on crime and punishment during the medieval period. Well, if you're going to answer that it's the church undoubtedly did have some influence over crime and punishment. You can't say it didn't, whether it's the biggest or not. Church courts, that allowed priests to be tried in a different court. It also allowed criminals who memorised the neck verse to escape being tried in the secular non-church courts. And the thing for them that was good was that the church courts never executed anybody. Sanctuary got in the way a little bit. Sanctuary helped, again, criminals to go some way to escaping justice that other people faced if they managed to run away with church. It's a crazy, mind-blowing idea that you could run away to a church and not escape punishment entirely, because you had to either go into exile or face trial in the church courts after 40 days. But it's kind of getting in the way a little bit. It's certainly having influence. I should have started with that. You perhaps should start in an introduction with talking about the word influence. What does it mean to influence? Well, if you've been influenced by somebody, it means that person has managed to compel you to do something. It means change something. So thinking about what has the church changed, William I brought in the church courts, and this is the thing that I was talking about. The church allowed sanctuary. We've also got trial by ordeal, which of course ends in 1215. These are all examples of the influence that the church has over crime and punishment in the medieval period. But what about local communities? Well, we know local communities have a big role to play in law enforcement in the medieval period, from the hue and cry, where you had to down tools and go and chase the criminal if the cry went up, or you would be punished. You've got tithings, where as soon as you reached the age of 12, you were put into a tithing of a group of men. You all had to make sure everybody else is obeying the local laws. A village constable would volunteer to help maintain law and order in the village. Local people would be involved in trials, not trials by ordeal, of course, but just the normal trials, what you would call the secular trials, the non-religious trials. So local communities certainly play a role in law and order. But you want to have a good look at the monarch as well. How does the monarch influence law and order? Now, it's 500 years, so there's lots of different monarchs. Stuck in your books, though, you should have a little sheet. I'll walk over to an example of that little sheet, actually, in a moment. This sheet is really important because it has some specific named examples. Here it is, that you could use, like specific laws that were passed which show the influence that the king had. Oh, well, of course, it was a monarch, William I, which I just wrote on the board for you in the lesson. It was the William I who conquered England as the first Norman ruler of England. He's the one who allowed the church courts to be set up in the first place. On the other hand, there is the example of Henry II and Thomas Becket. Henry II was punished by the church. That kind of seems to suggest the church, in some respects, you would say, superseded the king in terms of influence over law and order. Or you can look at it the other way and think, well, actually, more on balance, the king, the monarch, had more influence. Or you could say, actually, local communities, it's entirely up to you what you argue, so long as you argue forcefully. Now, final tip from me, of course, and this is going to be tricky. If you want those top marks, you perhaps might be getting across the fact that this is 500 years of history. What are the chances that for constantly 500 years, these people stayed in control for that whole thing, as in had the biggest influence over crime and punishment? Maybe at a certain time it was the church, maybe at another time it was the monarch, maybe another time it was local communities, because we've got the Anglo-Saxons, we've got the Normans, then we've got the later medieval period. You've got to weigh all of this up yourself. But remember, history is an argument, not a story. So you've really got to make your mind up before you start.